today's experience features Dominique Kagele, Stephen Johnson, Vanessa Nunez, and I won't tell you. You have to figure out which of them have these following attributes. All three of them are Anderson MBAs. One is a current student, two are alumni. We have one Ph.D. in the group. We have one M.D. in the group. There are 6 children. We have parents in the group, 6 children overall. 2 of them are fully employed MBA participants. One of them is a full-time MBA participant. There's a published author. I'll cover up the name, but here's the book, Small Beginnings Require Bigger Dreams, but you'll have to figure out who's the author. We have an angel investor. We have an entrepreneur. We have 2 double Bruins, meaning undergrad and grad, plus we have a double Bruin combo significant other. So, and just personally, 3 friends for me, a great friend, a good friend, and a new friend. Dominique is a great friend. I've had the honor of interviewing Dominique twice on Drive Time. She was nominated by her peers in her graduating class of 2020, so she was one of our summer spotlights 2 years ago, where I first got to hear her story. Last year, she was part of a 5-person alumni panel honoring Women's History Month. Both of those episodes are online, and they're both really, really rich. And she's my great friend because I know her a lot. Stephen is my good friend. Stephen has been on my wish list for over 18 months. Oh, no, I gave it away because Stephen published the book. So it's Stephen's book. He published it during his time at Anderson. And I was like, oh my gosh, Stephen, this is so cool. Nobody publishes a book during grad school. Would you be on Drive Time? But he's been on my wish list because, COVID and complications. So, and he's going to be our guest 2 weeks from now also. So there's more chances to hear Stephen in even longer form. And then my new friend is Vanessa, who graciously has joined us and is our third voice on today's panel. And the way this came about was 2 months ago, I reached out to Dominique and said, hey, in honor of Black History Month, maybe, how we did last year, we had a panel, but this year maybe I would do focused events. And Dominique, so humble, Dylan, you've already focused on me, why don't you share that with other people? And out of that, Dominique started to say, well, what if I reached out to Stephen? And I know a person, Vanessa, I saw online. She looks like really interesting. So thank you, Dominique, because Dominique has done a ton of work. And Dominique is a big executive with a big life and a family. And this is the kind of culture that we are at UCLA Anderson. We get a hold of ideas and we take them and we take little acorns and we grow mighty oaks. So this is exciting for me. I told my wife this morning when we walked the dogs, I have butterflies. I haven't had butterflies before a public event in years. This is my 20th year at UCLA. But I really have it like we could possibly develop something that could be really rich for current students, for alumni, and even for future generations, because we do have so many incredible stories. So we are honoring Black History Month. We are looking forward, from Black history to Black futures. I think the forward focus of Anderson is always part of what we do. That's that think in the next, think fearlessly. We're looking at healthcare today. We have 3 people with expertise, and you're going to learn a lot. You're also going to be hopefully inspired because all of these folks are part of your network. So with no further ado, let me just logistics. If you could name yourself, I've got all screens here everywhere, but if you could name yourself, you want to put your class year, if you are a current student or an alum. If you're a new 2025, oh my gosh, please make sure you put 2025 after your name just so we can be grateful that you're here. If you are a friend or family or a loved one, you can just put guest, or you can name yourself however you want to. We have some wonderful friends and family here today. So with no further ado, I'm going to kind of fade into the background and just be a fanboy and go ooh, ah from time to time as appropriate. But Dominique is actually going to kind of guide the conversation, and the introductions are going to be more formal from each of the members. But I'm going to stop my sharing, and did that work? Did I stop share? Okay, and then introduce you to our panel, which is going to be led by Dominique Kagele.
Let's take myself off mute. So thank you everybody for joining, and pardon me while I figure out how to share. Let's see, slideshow. Okay, so I can't see anybody because I'm fully presenting from my entire desktop, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, Dylan, for, again, the opportunity to be able to speak with you. It's been such a pleasure to be able to chat with you on many occasions, and I also consider you a dear and good friend too. I'm also just so excited to be able to share some of this time speaking with all of you, and hopefully not speaking to, but speaking with everybody on this call, with Stephen, with Vanessa, who again really just embody excellence in their everyday, personal lives as well as careers. And so I'm really just humbled and honored to be able to share this time with all of you. So as Dylan already mentioned, today we're going to be talking about, essentially the title is From Black History to Black Futures, in commemoration of Black History Month. So obviously, as we all know, Black History Month typically has been focused on a number of really key individuals who have made a path for essentially reducing inequities along racial lines. Today, we're going to talk a bit about that, our own personal experiences, but also to what we're doing to ensure better Black futures. And, not only just Black futures, but all communities of color. So today, like I said, I'm joined by Stephen and Vanessa to really talk about those things. So just very quickly, I'll give a brief background on myself. As some of you may know, I am trained as a scientist. And before Anderson, really, I got my PhD at the University of Nevada, Reno. I actually grew up in Reno, which was not very diverse when I was growing up. I think it's increased in its diversity now. But essentially, ever since I can remember, I wanted to be a scientist. And that's really because my dad, who's an immigrant himself, actually was taking classes to become a physician. And so there were many textbooks that were science oriented. I remember specifically a microbiology book that I just loved, as well as anatomy and physiology. And what I really wanted to do was to just take that science and be able to apply it to helping people. So I'm very fortunate in that, I had that exposure early on in life. But essentially, I grew up in Reno, being one of, if not the only minority in classes, one of the few, and certainly one of the only Black kids in class. And so I think that Stephen and Vanessa and I share that common experience, really, of not seeing a lot of people who look like us, and not, just feeling a sense of being alone a bit, and having to overcome that. But as I mentioned, I grew up in Reno. My parents both worked full time. And so we didn't really have a lot of economic resources, and we certainly didn't have people around us who were professionals in their trade, like a doctor, for example, or an engineer or a lawyer. And so we didn't really have those people around to be able to talk to see what is it like? What does it take in order for us to be, for me to be, XYZ, or to enter this industry? And so it's really one of my purposes, one of my key goals in life is to mitigate that gap, and really be able to give back to my community, and to be able to show other little girls who look like me that you can be something, you can be whatever you dream up, essentially. But I grew up seeing all of that sacrifice that my parents made in order to give us the best opportunities moving forward. And I also know that that's something that Stephen, Vanessa, and I share, and I'm sure many of you, everybody who's on this call as well. But essentially, got my PhD, then went to Anderson, and really went to Anderson to kind of bridge the gap in my knowledge from a business standpoint. I've worked in various medical and scientific roles in the pharmaceuticals industry prior to Anderson, but I really wanted to take that to the next level, and to be able to work in an area and a function that enables me to understand the science, which I already understood, but also to bring economic value not only to the business, but primarily to patients, right, and to communities that we, that obviously need those resources and those therapies. So I went to Anderson, as Dylan already mentioned. I graduated in 2020, and I'm currently kind of in two roles right now. I'm working in corporate development, which also known as business development, where essentially I am kind of at that intersection between the science and understanding the therapeutic value of different technologies and different platforms, but also understanding the economic value drivers and then being able to execute on that. So that's kind of half of my role, and the other is really commercialization product strategy. And I'm at Roche Genentech up in the Bay Area. So today I'm going to be talking about less about that role, and because obviously it's very important to me, because I wouldn't be in pharmaceuticals if I didn't obviously care about bringing transformative therapies to patients and to all patients. But specifically today, I want to talk about one of my projects that I've been working on with a number of other co-founders that we're developing, which is really to target health disparities in communities of color, and really just empowering life science and biotechnology companies in the pursuit of that. But with that, I'm going to actually hand the baton to Stephen and let him introduce himself as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Dominique. Thank you so much, Dylan, Vanessa. Thank you. It's really an honor to be on the panel with all of you. And it's also an honor just to represent Anderson and UCLA. As Dylan mentioned, my name is Stephen Johnson. My wife and I met at UCLA as undergrads a long time ago. So we're both double Bruins. My wife has a master's degree in social work. And of course, I just got my MBA from Anderson last year. So very proud of staying connected to the community here in Los Angeles. I was born and raised here in LA in the inner city. Single mom and grandmother raised me. I'm the eldest of four. We lived in an environment where there weren't a lot of college graduates walking around, to be honest. And I think listening to I'll back up a little bit. I remember visiting when I decided to apply to Anderson. I remember visiting for the first time and meeting Dylan for the first time, or at least hearing Dylan for the first time. And these pillars that are mentioned earlier in today's talk about thinking fearlessly and sharing success and driving change, and I think thinking in the next was another one of the big kind of driving things. They all really resonated with just who I am as a person, and it really made me feel like UCLA is a great school. We all know that, but there's times when an institution can become so big that you don't really feel the personal connection. I'm so grateful to Dylan, because as soon as I heard you say these things with such passion, it made me feel like, yeah, this is where I need to be, right? Like this is the type of language that I like to speak. And a call like today, or a webinar like today, really, I think, examples that, right? Like we get a chance to kind of speak to you guys. So, back to my story. So I grew up in LA. My mom and grandmother raised me in the inner city. My mother was a teenage mom. She dropped out of college after having 6 months after having me, just couldn't handle the responsibilities of doing college and raising me. She also didn't have a father in the household, right? So there's a lot of really historical challenges in my community that were real in my own early upbringing. But hearing maybe through osmosis, who knows? I always grew up wanting to be a scientist as well, kind of to the point of what Dominique said. And I remember as a kid thinking that science is hard, math is hard. These are things that I'm going to have to be able to accomplish, and not, again, having any role models around me or any peers around me that I could go to and say, hey, can you help me with this? Or can we, work on this together? And I think that, this idea of thinking fearlessly, kind of to go back to that theme, was even as a child deciding, I can't be afraid of this, right? I have to, if this is what I want, and this is what I want to do with my life, I can't be afraid of whatever is along the path of getting there. And if it's, organic chemistry, so be it, right? If it's calculus 2, so be it, right? So right, cover your ears, Dylan, right? So it's kind of part of that path, right? And understanding that if I'm the only one who I can rely on, because my mom never took these courses and my dad is not around and I don't have an older brother and I don't have a community that can provide that, then hey, I can go to the library. This is pre-internet, kind of dates me a little bit, but like I can go pick up an encyclopedia, right? So there were the things that my mom and grandmother taught me really that maybe my education kind of outgrew at some point, but that my life will never outgrow, was just commitment to yourself, right? The ability to believe in yourself and the ability to really have I'm not going to take no as an answer attitude. And that attitude that I've adopted really from my mom and grandmother has helped me to achieve really every goal that I really set my heart to. Again, back to like seeing like there were no college graduates, right? So the desire to study science, but then also desire to go to UCLA as an undergraduate was just, no one did that really, like in my community. No one did that. So when I did it, and it was like this huge success for myself personally, it also was a very lonely place to be in, right? Because you kind of reach this point in your life and you're like, well, yes, I'm so excited. I did it for so many years. I've been wanting this and working hard and all the late nights and all the studying and right, all of these sacrifices. And then you achieve that thing and you look around, it's like, oh, but where's everyone else, right? Where are the kids I grew up with? And you start to really understand a little bit better about how the world works and how the decisions that are made really at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old have long lasting impacts. So for me, once I got to UCLA, it was a little depressing, to be honest with you. Sitting in physics classes and chemistry classes and biology classes. I was a microbiology major as an undergrad. And for the most part, I was the only person of color in most of my classes. I was definitely the only African-American male in like 99% of my classes on campus. So how does that impact my social life? How does that impact, right, how I may be perceived when walking into a classroom? I remember my very first day at UCLA, I walked into, it was an honors course. I tested well and all the things you're supposed to do. And my teacher looks at me and says, are you sure you're in the right class, right? And she could have had all the right intentions in the world. And maybe I looked lost, who knows, right? But the truth was, right, the way that felt was not good. And especially in the context of being the only, it didn't feel too great to have that experience. But again, with the way that I was raised, I never interpreted those things or like internalized those types of experiences as, oh, this means it's not for me, right? Or this means I can't do it, right? I don't see enough people like me, so that means this is not for me. No, it was, if I'm the only one, then so be it. And that was kind of the attitude that I had as an undergraduate. But funny enough, as I got closer to graduating and like had this great experience at UCLA, I was a student researcher. We can get into some more of the details if anyone's interested in that. But had this really great experience. But then really I started to think more about like, what can I do, right? Is there anything that I can personally do to help my community, right? So it's not good enough that I'm the only person here, right? It's not good enough that I made it. It started to feel like I have a responsibility of sorts to look back and reach back and to share this success that I've had with other people, whether it's just inspiring them, whether it's just being a mentor, whether it's, whatever it may be, right? So as I thought more about that, I really caught the entrepreneurial bug my last year of college. And I started a tutoring company. I said, you know what, there's plenty of kids. If you ask most 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, what do you want to be when you get older? You'll hear some, very similar things: police officer, doctor, lawyer, teacher, right? And for where I grew up, it was a lot of doctors and like a lot of like, I want to become a doctor when I get older. Like that was considered to be the mountaintop of professionalism, right, in my community. So the contrast between growing up that way and hearing so many of my peers say that they wanted that, to actually being in an environment where like, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we're going to make this happen, where we're going to actually materialize this dream, and feeling like, well, now I'm the only one. That contrast was really killing me on the inside. And I wanted to use my gifts and my education and my skill set to go back to, I literally went back to the middle schools that I had attended, the elementary schools I attended, the high schools I attended, and said, you know what? If I can help in any way, if I can tutor kids, if I can, speak to students, whatever it is that I can do to be of help and assistance, just to say, I did it, you can do it, right? And no, it's not as simple as I did it, you can do it, but I'm not gonna leave after you see me leave this place. You can call me, you can email me, right? Let's stay in communication, let's stay in community with each other so that we can help each other to get where we want to go. So, that process really took me off of the path of science, to be honest with you, right? Like I was so interested in, so like, to be a great scientist, and maybe my co-panelists will share this feeling. There's a lot of like head down, do the work, right? Don't look around too much. Don't get distracted. This is a hard-nosed life. This is a competitive environment, and you need to get the work done and try to be at the top of your class. So again, when I kind of lifted my head from that at kind of like my senior year of college, and realized that I could live the rest of my life like this, and then at the end of that journey, sure, I'd have whatever accolades, sure, I'd have achieved that childhood dream, but what about everyone else, right? I couldn't let go of that idea. That's when I decided to become an entrepreneur. I started an educational company, worked with as many kids as I possibly could, especially in math and science, right, which are traditionally the courses where students of color and students in underrepresented communities specifically start to not have the same level of support, the same level of access to information. And that became my mission in life. And to some degree, it is still a great mission that I will hopefully and probably maintain for the rest of my life. And that journey then led me back to Anderson, right, some 10 years later, where it's, to use another term, like thinking in the next, right? Say, well, what's next for me? What is next that I'm interested in? And my entrepreneurial journey taught me so much more about, hey, there are plenty of people out here who are passionate, who have started businesses, and they can't get any funding, right? They don't even know they may not know what a VC even is. They may not know what an angel investor even is. They don't have, I remember the first time I heard of the friends and family round. I was like, who from where I'm from has friends and family that can write them a check to do anything? I don't have those types of friends and family. I'm assuming there's other people like that who don't have those types of friends and family, right? So it's like there's this systemic, I wouldn't even call it systemic racism. There's like systemic lack of knowledge, lack of information. And, you have these people who are always kind of butting against these ceilings that they didn't realize were there, right? So as I began to think in the next for myself, it was, well, okay, this educational company is going really great. We're making a big impact on plenty of lives, but I also feel this calling to help entrepreneurs, to help with information, to help with education, but also to be able to write a check, right? So I started a small fund about a year ago. I've been able to invest in 3 companies so far over the last 12 months that are all run and started by people of color. One is by a woman founder, the other 2, one is by African-American founder, and the other is a Latino founder. So I'm very proud of that, right? So there's a part of me that says, my VC side and my angel investing hat says, I need to make money, I need to make returns. But there's another part of me that just says, you know what, this is the return to my soul and to my spirit and to my heart, that I was able to kind of make this happen and be able to help someone. And even if it's just symbolic to them, that says, you know what, I had a conversation with a person who is from the same communities that I'm from, who actually heard what I'm doing and said, yes, I believe in you and I will back you. That in itself has power for them to then go on and say, okay, maybe I can succeed. Maybe I can take future conversations with other individuals. So I feel like I've talked too much. I have so much more to say to you guys, but I'm really hoping that those who are listening in today and who are joining us, if you have questions, that you throw them in the chat or that you can bring them up, because I would love to have conversation with all of you guys.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I'll let Vanessa introduce herself as well.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Really excited to get to be on this panel with such incredible humans. Definitely resonate a lot with what both of you have already said. So definitely am in the right space and in great company. My name is Vanessa. I am currently an MD MBA candidate at the David Geffen School of Medicine and here at Anderson. I grew up in Merced County. So for folks who aren't familiar, it's a very rural, very agricultural community. Both of my parents were immigrants from Mexico. My dad worked as a farm laborer. My mom worked cleaning homes. And very similar, I grew up in a very small town, like the typical small town that you hear about. That's where I grew up. And the dynamic was very similar to what Dominique had mentioned. It was a lot of kids who were children of immigrants who were just kind of going along for the ride. There's a lot of uncertainty when you grow up in that community. Jobs are dependent on weather and things like that. And you kind of grow up hearing those things. And so a lot of the times you kind of just go through the motions and try to do your best to make sure that you're, taking advantage of the opportunities that a lot of people gave up a lot to give you. And so for me, it just so happened that, as I'm sure in a lot of schools, at one point you get put in honors classes or you don't. And so at that branch point for us happened in middle school, and I just happened to, yes, I worked hard, but it also happened that I got lucky and I got placed in that honors track. And so then I had that attention and that access to counselors and mentors and things like that, that ultimately, led me to be able to apply to UCLA and come here for undergrad. So a little bit of what led me to healthcare: both of my parents, when I was in high school, had chronic conditions. So my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, my mom had cancer, and in the community that we were, there weren't any healthcare centers that had the capacity to care for them nearby. And so, we had one small free clinic in town that cared for everybody, and you had to wait a really long time in those waiting rooms. And again, it worked out for our family that by the time that I was in high school, I was, well versed enough to be able to navigate websites, to be able to understand the insurance program. And so we were able to get them care in the Bay Area at an academic center. But looking back in my community, that's definitely not the case for a lot of folks. And it's definitely not the case for a lot of the undocumented farm laborers that are in my community. And so when I went to UCLA for undergrad, I came in with this notion: I want to be a doctor. I'm going to go back to my community and fill in those care gaps. Met some of the same things that Stephen did. They called those science classes the weeder classes, and they're trying to get people out and they're trying to make the classes smaller. And so you're trying to, for me, navigate that, but also try and be present at home when you're needed. My parents at that point were still not doing great. And so it was a balance between trying to get my academics in order and put myself in a position where I could achieve those things, but also be present where I was needed. Eventually ended up in taking a lot of public health classes and really resonated with the structure that they had. Finally started putting a lot of names to things that I had experienced in my community, like health disparities, and all of these things just started to make sense. And I was like, oh, that happened to me. That was what I was going through, and all those barriers to care and language barriers and things like that. That's me, that's my community. And so going forward, I resonated with that and thought that was a really important, public health is really important to integrate into medicine to be able to give good care, which it absolutely is. And so then when I went into David Geffen and started medical school, I came in with that notion that I wanted to do a dual degree because I knew I needed that additional training. Medicine will make you a great doctor, but there's so many other aspects to medicine that you need to know in order to be able to take good care of patients. And so I came in thinking that I was going to do an MPH, and I get to the wards and you start seeing that there are so many system level issues and operational issues that are preventing you from giving the care that you need to your patients. And it was great for me because I had an understanding of the health disparities and how social and economic factors can impact health, but I didn't understand how I was going to change it at an institutional level and an operational level. How could I use my knowledge to make sure that not only the patient that I was seeing in the room was getting the care that they needed, but that all of our patients were getting the care that they needed. And so that's actually what led me to Anderson. And so came here, didn't have a background in business whatsoever, so very much felt like a fish out of water here, but everybody has been very very welcoming. I was one of those people who did not know what an angel investor was. Still think I'm trying to wrap my head around that. But, I think it's definitely helped a lot. I think being here and learning how things work and how businesses run, unfortunately, but healthcare is a business. Whether we think that's the way that it should be or not, that's the way that it's operating, at this point in time. And so being here and understanding how those systems work, I know that that's going to pay off a lot when I further down the road. Eventually, I see myself working with either like safety net hospitals or more on the county state level to work with resource management for patients who are on Medicare, Medicaid, patients who are uninsured, and really making sure that the limited resources that we do have are really being used effectively, and we're maximizing care for everybody, because everyone does deserve to have really comprehensive and great care. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Dominique, for inviting me onto the panel. Definitely resonated with what everyone said, but I know we're going to get into some topics, so I'll hold off for now.
No, honestly, thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you, Stephen, for providing introductions. Really, I'm just standing here so inspired, and also just so proud to say that we're all on Anderson, soon to be alumni for you, Vanessa. But just again, just so proud to, that we all are part of the same team here. So I have one more slide I wanted to share with everybody and kind of to orient today's discussion. So number one, I do hope that everyone feels enabled to participate, because we really do want this to be a discussion. And so today what we're going to talk about, if you remember, the title is From Black Futures, or Black History to Black Futures. And so what we're going to focus on are three of the most common disparities or inequities that communities of color and Black populations in particular experience and face on a daily basis. And then, to essentially Dylan's point of, how is it that we can drive change, and what is it that we're doing in our respective industries to really drive change and address some of these challenges that communities of color face. So we're really going to talk about three topics here: the lack of educational and professional opportunities, which I think we all have touched on a little bit, the three of us a little bit, but would love to kind of hear more about, what it is that we're doing to address some of those issues. The second is poor access to quality healthcare, and to Vanessa's point, what is it that we can do to reduce some of these health disparities in communities of color. And then finally, unequally distributed wealth. And Stephen kind of mentioned this already in terms of what he's doing in order to kind of address that disparity. But again, I'd love to have this be more of a conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing because those are the three topics that I wanted, hoping for us to talk about. And really, just get started on the first one, which is educational disparities, and how we've overcome that, and then really what we're doing in our day-to-day lives, really to kind of address that challenge. And how has our time at Anderson, how have we leveraged some of those resources at Anderson to enable us to address that challenge? And so I really wanted to just kind of give a few statistics at first, because let's see, am I still sharing my screen? No, I'm not. Good. Give a few statistics, and I'm sure everybody's kind of familiar, but when we talk about educational disparities, it's only 40% of Black and Brown students actually go to schools that have AP courses, and only a third of those students are actually enrolled in those courses. Something that Vanessa mentioned earlier is gifted and talented programs that Black and Brown communities have lower access to those kinds of programs. And we all know that those programs really enable people to demonstrate their capabilities, to basically refine their capabilities, and be among other students who are high achievers that then really inspires them to achieve more. And then finally, the last statistic that I had, which is schools that are more than 90% Black or Brown actually have governmental funding that is about $733 less per student. So per student than schools that are more than 90% white. So my question to the panel, which is basically, how have these obstacles impacted your life? And what kinds of actions have you taken to mitigate them? And as you know, I know we've talked a bit about this. So, and then finally, how has your Anderson education empowered you to really address some of these challenges? And so I'll go ahead and direct that first question to Stephen.
Sure. So, I guess listening to you and thinking back to my own experience, I grew up attending public school right in the inner city. And that's all I knew. So I didn't know what to compare it to. I didn't know what I was missing. And it was honestly through sports, it was through playing basketball that I got a scholarship offer to a private school on the west side of Los Angeles called Crossroads School. And then I learned pretty right away that what I had been experiencing academically was nothing close to what some of the other students my age in other more well-resourced schools were experiencing. So first of all, I think that it is an awareness that our educational system is not equal. It is not equitable, right? So we just kind of have to call it for what it is. We have public schools, we have charter schools, we have private schools, we have parochial schools. In each community, like there's so many different layers of difference here. It's not standardized, right? So just understanding that is important. And then I think that, for people like ourselves who are on this panel and those who are even in the room with us, I think, once you are educated, there's opportunity to give back to the schools that you come from, right? So knowing, if you know that, hey, the schools that I went to, or, Vanessa said, say the schools that I went to, Dominique can say the same thing, I'm sure, about Reno schools. It's, what can I do to give back to these communities that I know are there and I know don't have the same types of resources? As a parent, I make sure that I'm, in class with my own children, that I'm volunteering as a dad there and making sure that they, that they see that education is important, but also that I get a chance to kind of see, well, what are they learning, right? How is a teacher presenting this information? And can I fill the gaps there? And I would love to, my kids are young, but I imagine that as they get older, if there are opportunities for me to give even to their classmates, right, to be able to help and support other students, right? It's just it becomes a part of your lifestyle almost. In terms of Anderson, I think Anderson was very pivotal for me in understanding finance and in understanding how I'll say finance kind of drives change, right? So to say it in a very concise way. So, learning kind of that relationship, I think helps me in two ways. One is, put your money where your mouth is. And that can be donating to nonprofit organizations. It could be, again, it can be your time. It doesn't have to be money. It could also be time, money. Just put your energy behind what you say you believe in. But then also, what I really got from Anderson was, this whole idea of sharing success and this whole idea of discussing these types of topics with your classmates and with other individuals who are also passionate about it. It's pulling together resources, right? So any one of us may feel like a problem is too big for, just us to handle, right? I can't go back and change all of Merced, right, Vanessa? I can't go back and change all of Reno, right? I can't go back and change, all of the inner cities of Los Angeles, because it's a huge problem. But if I can partner with organizations or partner with other people who are interested in the same things, then we can make some change and we can impact people. And especially in the world that we live in right now, we're just the ability to distribute ideas, the ability to distribute content, the ability to reach, beyond those who you can see, physically, right? And we know that's all changing even with Web 3.0 and the metaverse and all these other concepts that are floating around. But just this idea is that we have a great opportunity right now to be able to create a platform and to use platforms that are already existing like Dylan is using this drive time platform to project information, to project ideas, to project thoughtful conversation, right? So at minimum, I think we all have like this responsibility to look at education and say we've all gone through whatever flavor of the educational system that we personally have experienced. And as we talk to our classmates, as we talk to our peers, as we talk to our friends, we get a sense of like what the differences were and how can we then become change agents, basically, right? So I think that's what I would want to say to everyone here. It's like, how can we collectively and individually become agents of change in the communities that we've come from, or maybe in communities that we haven't come from, but we're aware exist, right? We're aware that they're there, and we're aware that we may have some ability to help in those communities.
Thanks so much for that, Stephen. And I realized that it's 12:45 and we wanted to get through 3 different, very important and very broad topics today. But really quickly, I wanted to just see if anybody had any questions or even, any examples of how they're actually, how their experience has, been shaped, I guess, by some of these inequities. Personally, or if you're doing any kind of work to address some of those inequities as well. Would love to, to hear from the audience if you are so inclined.
Hey, Dominique, this is Karan here, and I want to thank you guys for just the amazing opportunity to hear you guys' story and just get this great information. I did want to know, how did you, because you're somewhat in the corporate world to my understanding, how did you navigate that being an African-American or minority or someone of color? And can you just speak to like some hurdles that you did face as you grew and navigated through, your career?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to share my experiences, and Stephen and Vanessa, if you'd like to as well, more feel free. But that's a great question, Karan, and we've been focusing a lot on educational disparities, but truth be told, professionally, there are some hurdles as well, and that can look like, my goodness, just marginalization in your workplace, having to kind of over demonstrate your capabilities, to kind of be seen in the same light as someone who is not a person of color. Me personally, I have experienced this in a number of environments, but one in particular that I'm thinking of where I actually was a postdoc. So after you get your PhD, then you often go and do research for a handful of years in another area. And so I went to the University of Utah, which was not very diverse at all. And so it was very difficult in really just having my voice heard and, really feeling like I was always being overly criticized for my thoughts, my work that I was presenting forth. And it really made me second guess myself a lot in terms of my capabilities and should I really be here, to a point that Stephen made, do I really belong here? Should I really be a scientist? Am I cut out for this? And it really made me question, my whole life path. And did I make the wrong decision? So luckily I stayed course, but eventually decided that I love science, but I don't want to work on the bench. And so I actually went into industry after that. And, even then, still really feeling sometimes that I just did not have the support of my leadership. And, that can take so many different flavors. But essentially what you have to do is ask yourself, okay, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? Take a good look at what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, and what impact is it that you want to have. And so I know that's, not a very simple answer, but really just doing that having that internal dialogue of what it is that you want to achieve. What is it that you want your impact to be? What is it that you want your legacy to be? And then moving backward from that point and then deciding, okay, which path do I continue to take? And so, yeah, obviously there are many obstacles, including getting passed up for promotions, being told that you're not ready enough, ready for a particular career move. You have there are all these different flavors, but essentially it comes back to, okay, what is it that I'm good at? What skills are those that I need to build? What are the skills that I don't necessarily need to build and that I can leverage other people's skills and strengths? And then again, just kind of piece that together. And so that's how I've been successful. When I grew up, I had this perfectionist attitude where I have to be good at everything. But Anderson has really taught me that there's a lane for everybody and that there are groups for a reason, right? Because not everybody can be good at everything. So understanding what you're good at, the unique value that you bring, and then moving forward from there. Vanessa, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, medicine is very hierarchical, and it has been that way for a long time. And so I think one of the challenges that we often face in medicine is fear speaking up because of retaliation, right? It's very easy that you're going to upset the wrong person. The person that you upset knows the person who's hiring for the job at the hospital you want to go to. And it's also this person that you want to speak up to might be evaluating you, right? So your entire grade can depend on the impression that you leave on this person. And so it's such you need to tread so lightly. And I think that is part of the profession, how it's set up, and it definitely needs to change. And I think one of the things that my classmates have been doing, and that, I think is really great, is a lot of students are standing up and saying, this isn't appropriate. This isn't how it should be. This isn't how, you can't treat us this way and expect us to come to work and be at our best and be able to take care of patients the way that you need to. And, I think that's one of the things too, one of the surprised, unintended takeaways from Anderson, right? And Dylan was talking about this earlier, is that at Anderson, you learn how to be a leader, you learn how to speak your ideas, you learn how to communicate so that people listen to you and that they understand, why you're saying the things that you're saying. And so I think that has helped already. And I think it'll definitely help in the future, is being able to, one, put yourself in a position where you can demand and take that time that you need to advocate for the things that you need to advocate for. And also, present it in a way where they need to listen to you because this is the way that it is. Of course, that doesn't take away, I'm still a woman of color coming into this room and trying to convince an older white man that we shouldn't be working 48 hours continuously. So, there's still those things that you can't necessarily get, overcome that easily, but really trying to, and this is an internal debate that I have with myself all the time, right? Because now I'm here, I'm getting my MD MBA from UCLA. People look at me and assume that I know things, whether I know or not. Obviously we get great training here, but now that title, those degrees carry more weight. And so now I'm going to have that opportunity that maybe other students in my position won't have, or other people in my position won't have. So it's a very challenging place to be in, because I know that now I have this privilege that a lot of other people in my position didn't have. And so even though I'm still walking in as a woman of color, I'm walking in as a woman of color with these letters behind my name that are somehow going to give me more credibility. And so it's one, using that to advance not only for myself, but for the communities that I care about and that I need to advocate for, but then using that to make room at the table for other people who don't have those degrees, right? I'm learning a lot from my MBA and, being a doctor, but there's other people who know a lot who don't have MBAs and don't have these degrees, but would still have really valuable things to contribute, and really valuable voices that need to be heard, and information that, without their information, we can't do our best, and we won't ever achieve our best if we don't bring them. And so trying to use the things that I have, the privileges that I'm building and coming across and taking and using that to open doors for myself and others.
Thanks for sharing, Vanessa. Did we have any other questions or comments from the audience? I realize that it's 12:53, so I want to be mindful of everybody's time.
Dominique, could I do a little just a mid-course process recommendation? So remember,
Yes.
tiny acorns, mighty oaks. So we don't know what we're doing. Dominique, Vanessa, and Stephen prepared actually three categories. So we've covered the first. So they've taken the time to prepare three different conversations. So, but we only ask for an hour of everybody's time. I teach speech communications, right? Never go long is a fundamental thing. So here's my invitation to the panel. If you all have time, I would love, and because this is recorded and it can live on longer, I would love to, go over the time because we can record this. And just kind of put it out there to the audience. If any of you need to leave at 1 o'clock, hey, it's a work day. We totally respect that, understand that, and we're so grateful for your attendance. But my invitation to the panel, if you all have the time, we could go ahead and continue the second and the third topic with the inequities in access to quality healthcare and inequities in wealth, because you've taken the time to pre-prepare your thoughts. So maybe we'll just be a little. What do we have? Do we have a pillar about flexibility? If we don't, we should. We'll be. Oh my
No,
God! Now,
now
and
you
that's
got
my
me busy. Now
doorbell,
you got
and
busy
doggies
minds.
are barking. Let's yay Zoom.
No, that's fine. No, honestly, I think actually we've talked a bit about, we've touched on each one of these topics a bit just naturally through the conversation. So,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be so formulaic and that we close the door on one and then start the other. And then so that's why, again, I'm more than happy to stay, but also I really do want to hear what the audience and what the participants want to hear about. What are some of the issues that are really important to you? Or alternatively, how have these I'm talking about health inequities because that's something that's really important to me and that's kind of my lane. But how have some of these racial disparities affected you? And are you also doing work yourselves in terms of addressing some of these disparities? But again, I want to kind of open it to the audience and kind of let the conversation flow in terms of what everybody's interested in.
I have a quick question, Dom.
Yeah. Hey, Zach.
Hey, long time no talk. It's been all of like 4 hours. So given that COVID has really, I think that, it's, widened the gap between, it's widened the gap, of equality between, specifically as it regards to education. What are some steps that you think that we can take to, help minimize that gap? As we talk about, education, we talk about some of these things, people who do have, people whose, family or parents are like doctors and, highly educated, they're going to have access to some of that, some of the tutoring services, some of the education services. How do we bridge that gap for, students who are having to learn through Zoom, who don't have access to some of those resources, especially given this hybrid work environment or hybrid school environment, rather?
I mean, that's a great question, Zach, and it's a big one. And, I can only attempt to, provide some guidance, but would love to hear, anybody else's thoughts on this too. But, I think what's critical is that we come from a point of understanding, or at least try to come from a position of understanding and compassion, because then you're able to really have a conversation with people. If you come, guns a-blazing with, I've got statistics, I've got facts, and I read the research and come off
Right.
that way, then you're just going to get, you're going to hit a brick wall, right? The people that you're speaking to, they're just not going to hear what you have to say. And, I'll be honest, even so-called experts right now are really learning as we go, because COVID is a new virus. It acts, unlike many other viruses. My PhD was in virology, and many of the things that COVID has displayed, and these different variants have displayed in terms of transmissibility, rate of reinfection. I'm also an immunologist by training, and even things that have kind of surprised me in terms of reinfection and antibody titers going down so quickly. The truth of the matter is that even experts are still learning and understanding more about this disease on a daily basis. And so what I'd say is when you're having conversations to educate, again, try to come from a point of compassion and just know that not everybody obviously sees the way you do, but to try to hear with open ears. And then at that point, once you've established that trust, then try to educate, and then again, point to credible resources like the CDC, like WHO, like New England Journal of Medicine, these very reputable sources of medical and scientific information. But that's kind of what I can add to that. But very good question. I don't. Does anybody else have any thoughts on how we can mitigate that educational gap?
I'll speak up a little bit on this. I think that this is a big topic. I definitely don't have the answer to that question, but I would say that, marginalized communities feel marginalized for a reason. The virus did not create marginalization in these communities. It was already there. It exposed a lot of what was already there the whole time that most of the world did not recognize or pay attention to. So I think that, instead of maybe framing our support for people around like the current trend of the day, because that might change, and then, COVID,
Right.
Vaccinated and COVID's gone and you would kind of forget about it. It really is to just pay attention to, well, how did this happen? So it's kind of more of how than the what, and then thinking about why are vaccination rates lower in certain communities? Why is trust of government lower in certain communities? Right? We are separating these conversations around education and wealth and health disparities, like we're putting them in separate buckets, but they're all connected.
Yeah.
They're all kind of the same, right? So I grew up going to the county hospital. I remember waiting in lines for hours. And I'm sick, I'm a child. So as a child, I'm interpreting the world as, oh, I'm not cared for, right? And it's hard to deprogram that person after they've been raised in that environment and then say, oh, go read a book, you should do better, right? So it's and it's not to say that the person should not say go read a book, because hey, education and educating yourself is very valuable, but it's a very complicated and very complex conversation to have. And I just think that, the empathy that I have for people who are living in the environments that I was raised in is, yes, it is tough. And yes, you feel like the world is against you. And yes, you feel like you can't make it and you're living paycheck to paycheck. And yes, I get all that stuff. But what can you do? What can you control? Right? Can you take an extra hour to sit with your kids and do homework? Can you read to your toddlers right at night? Like the small things that we can take control of that, research does tell us has long lasting impact, right? Are the things that I think we should spend a lot of time on. I know there's a lot of debate around universal healthcare, around universal basic income, around, kind of just throwing money at things. And who knows, maybe that'll end up being a great solution in the future for us. But I also think that just meeting people where they are and saying, I'm not judging you, and how can I give, can go a very, very long way.
Agreed. Thank you for that.
Of course.
By the way, the Assistance League of LA is doing a book drive, and they are doing a drive for education right now. Shameless plug. Dom, I told you I'd call you out on it. So Assistance League of LA, Operation School Bell, we're running it back.
Also, I just want to introduce everybody to Zach, because Zach and I are FEMBA classmates. We both graduated in 2020. He's one of my best friends from and yeah, as you mentioned, we talk almost every week, and so that's another thing that you can look forward to, is being an Anderson alum, is just building not only an incredible network, but also just a close group of friends. So thank you, Zach, for calling in.
Pleasure.
And could I jump in and introduce two other remarkable guests, Mr. Jose and Miss Jeannie Olivares, who are here today, who are Dominique's parents. And Bert and Daniel is also a very special person in Dominique's life. So we really are honored to have friends and family here. And Zach also, former classmates. Thank you all for being here. And Mr. and Mrs. Olivares, thank you very much for your daughter. She's a contribution to our community, top to bottom. Thank you all. You did very, very well, and we are honored to have her as one of our alumni voices. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's 1:04, so I'm thinking, do we, Vanessa, I see that you've written something, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to share what you've written.
Definitely, I know we have another question, so I just, as a what can you do, everyone at Anderson is going to be in a position of a power and privilege when we leave here, and people here are going to be in a position to hand out opportunities and decide who gets opportunities. And when you are in that position, reflect on, remember that not everyone had the same starting line, not everyone had the same opportunities. Think about how far someone has come to get to, be on your desk, their application be on your desk. And think about how your qualifications or your check marks that you're looking for candidates, how are they elitist and how are they excluding people by definition? Because they are. If you're requiring, certain degrees, if you're requiring certain job experience that for whatever reason a person didn't have access to or didn't have the opportunity to get, you're excluding candidates that because of things like COVID and not being able to go to school, and their parents are working and don't have anyone at home to help them out, they're being put at this different starting line, right? They're starting 10, 12, 20 feet behind everybody else. So that was my one thought.
Thank you, Vanessa. Awesome. Okay, so it's 1:05. Also, to appreciate everybody for being along with us on this journey. As again, this is a new format because, as Dylan mentioned before, all of the Drive Time podcasts had been pre-recorded. So we're kind of learning and iterating as we go. So appreciate all of your patience with us as we kind of figure out how things are. So I know we're over, but I wanted to just give us one more opportunity to see if there were any additional questions from the audiences or any other comments before we close up.
I have one last question, and I guess we can start with Stefan. When you're from underprivileged communities, and you're not really taught about credit, you're not really taught about assets and financial responsibility and compound interest and buying real estate, cash flow, EBITDA, etc. How do we, in your opinion, close the generational gap? Because we don't necessarily, we aren't informed about opportunities and things we should know to put us ahead in life. How do you think we close that gap and expand our wealth as a community?
Great question. And I think I'm going to go back to I feel like I've said it multiple times today, even, which is just once you do have it, go back and share it. Right. That's really the best answer I can give. Right. So you're a student at Anderson. You're going to learn a lot of things. Right. I became a student at Anderson. I learned a lot of things that I did not know. And all I want to do now is tell as many people as I possibly can. Right. So when I have a conversation with people from my community, I get to share that. And maybe you're not going to sit down and create a course and do something very formal, but it's all relationship based, right? So as many of us who get the opportunity to gain the information, to gain the knowledge, to get the education, who can go back and then share that information, like that's how the tentacles start to spread throughout the community, right? And if you want to do it formally and say, like, I remember at one point, I would do like free after school tutoring at my local high school or my local library, right? And it's like, hey, okay, no cost. I'm going to be sitting here for 2 hours at, from 3 to 5. After your mom is probably still at work, your dad's probably still at work. You would be otherwise on the streets and walking around and maybe getting in trouble. Come here, it's a safe space, and I can help you get through your work. It's like, it may seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing, right? Because those parents appreciate what you do. Those kids appreciate what you do, right? So, Karan, your friend group, I would start there. Your family, I would start there, right? Because as you spread that information to them, then they catch on to it, and that just spreads even further, right? So, and if you want to do something more formal where you have a platform, you want to use social media, you want to, whatever you can, have a conversation with Dylan, put something on at school or something like that. I don't know if you're part of the BBSA. I don't know if you're part of the, the finance association there. Like, I'm sure there's other really formal opportunities, maybe even to gather people together and share that information. Great question, man. I love that question.
Well, I think that will probably wrap it up because we are already at 1:10. So Dylan, I'll hand it off to you to to close this out.
Sure. Well, again, Dominique, thanks for being so generous with your creativity and your time. Thanks for all the conversations that you and Vanessa and Stephen had to prepare to have a linear logical flow, to look at the big picture and try to focus on three important elements of a very complicated thing that our entire world is wrestling with right now in the middle of a COVID. I mean, the stressors to our system right now are incredible. So I'm just honored to have, I like that, Stephen. Like, we're using this platform to kind of broaden how we can talk to one another, and just, thank you each for taking the time. Thanks you all for attending today. We have never had a mother and a father attend. That's just, I'm like all verklempt. It's just awesome. It's just really incredible. And I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat myself, but I'm not sorry. I have heard you all's story of coming to America and trusting that this country could be a place that was worthy of your sacrifice, such that you could pay it forward to your children, and you did that. And Dominique is a wonderful example of that. So it's just, I've never had a mother and a father on a podcast. So that's just a beautiful thing to me personally.